The Austrian Theory of the Trade Cycle and Other Essays by Richard Ebling is a collection of essays by Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich Hayek, Murray Rothbard, Gottfried Haberler, and Roger Garrison. The purpose of the book is to inform the reader on the nuances and causes of the trade cycle. The essay by Mises, The Austrian Theory of the Trade Cycle, is a generous overview of the entire theory. Mises begins by describing how flattering it is that in his time, how widely accepted and talked about the Austrian theory of the trade cycle was. Then he goes on to explain that another school, the currency school, had attempted to explain an economic boom caused by the extension of credit resulting from the issue of banknotes without metallic backing. Mises then says this school of thought misunderstood that checks or current accounts can play the same role in the extension of credit as banknotes. He writes, consequently, the expansion of credit can result not only from the excessive issue of banknotes, but also from the opening of excessive current accounts. It is because it misunderstood this truth that the currency school believes that it would suffice, in order to prevent the reoccurrence of economic crises, to enact legislation restricting the issue of banknotes without metallic backing, while leaving the expansion of credit by means of current accounts unregulated. He says that historically, this school of thought gave a bad name to the English school's attempt to explain the trade cycle. Mises then goes on to explain the trade cycle theory. He says it begins with the removal of the gold standard, which allows banks to lend more money than they actually have. He says that as they continue to expand credit on a larger and larger scale, prices and wages correspondingly continue to rise. He writes, but the inflation and the boom can continue smoothly only as long as the public thinks that the upward movement of prices will stop in the near future. As soon as public opinion becomes aware that there is no reason to expect an end to inflation and that prices will continue to rise, panic sets in. He continues, everyone then rushes to exchange money for goods. Pointing to Germany in the 1920s, Mises calls this part of the process the flight into real values. As people no longer value their currency and begin to only value goods, the currency collapses. Mises says that if the banks decided to halt the expansion of credit in time to stop the collapse of the currency, that it would quickly be seen that the false impression of profitability created by the credit expansion has led to unjustified investments. He writes, some enterprises cut back their scale of operation, others close down or fail. Prices collapse, and crisis and depression follow the boom. He says that to recover from this depression, that the economy must adapt itself to the losses and correct itself to its natural level. Mises says this artificial boom had been brought on by the extension of credit and by lowering the rate of interest consequent on the intervention of the banks. He ends his essay by saying, it is not the task of the banks to remedy the consequences of the scarcity of capital or the effects of wrong economic policy by extension of credit. It is certainly unfortunate that the return to a normal economic situation today is delayed by the pernicious policy of shackling commerce. Friedrich Hayek's essay, Can We Still Avoid Inflation?, is on much of the same topics as Mises's. However, he spends the first half of his essay explaining the political complications of stopping inflation. He begins his essay by saying that inflation can absolutely be stopped by the central banks if they choose to do so. However, he says that it is very politically difficult for them to do so. He writes, my main aim tonight is to bring out clearly why we must stop inflation if we are to preserve a viable society of free men. Once this urgent necessity is fully understood, I hope people will also gather the courage to grasp the hot irons which must be tackled if the political obstacles are to be removed and we are to have a chance of restoring a functioning market economy. Hayek then writes, The hot iron which we must grasp if we are to preserve the enterprise system and the free market is, therefore, the power of the unions over wages. Unless wages, and particularly the relative wages in the different industries, are again subjected to the forces of the market and become truly flexible, in particular groups downwards as well as upwards, there is no possibility for a non-inflationary policy. Hayek points out that booms are caused by what we understand today as malinvestment, when central banks artificially extend credit in the marketplace. We should understand a boom as an overzealous economy, growing and investing in areas it does not have the resources to do so. Austrians, like Hayek, want growth to be savings-induced. This growth is sustainable. He says that the level of investment is determined by the supply of loanable funds. Should this supply be perverted, the economy will be perverted also. The Austrian Theory of the Trade Cycle and other essays by Richard Ebling is an enlightening book on its titled subject. Perhaps, if the American populace read and understood these writings, we could much more easily overcome the political obstacles detailed by Hayek, and we could prevent the tragic tale of the central banker's perversion of the marketplace that is so eloquently detailed by Mises in this book. Ebling's book perfectly explains what causes economic booms and busts. If future generations heed its warnings, not only would our nation avoid another Great Depression, our economy would be put on a sustainable track of growth that would lead to great new technology, discoveries, and wealth.